Price cuts, massive concessions, and homes sitting for months. Something is happening in the Denver housing market that has sellers more desperate than we've seen in years. In this video, I'll break down what's really going on, from the spike in price reductions to the extreme inspection credits and closing cost offers sellers are making just to keep deals alive. We'll also look at how long homes are sitting, which areas are being hit the hardest, and the real reason sellers are still pricing like it's 2022. I'm Landon Smith, a resident and local realtor here in the Denver Metro, and I help people just like you every week navigate this market. Whether you're planning to sell or even thinking about buying, you need to know what's driving all of this. So let's start with the number that has sellers slashing prices across the city. Homes in Denver are selling for an average of 96% of their original list price. So that's a 4% below their asking price. And in some cases, the typical pattern is that they'll come on the market, reduce 1%, reduce another percent 15 to 30 days later, and then take an offer that's 2% less than that final price. That's the most common occurrence. Obviously, that's the average, right? There are homes that have been on for over a year that are still trying to find their buyer and have dropped over 100,000. I've seen multiple of those in the last couple weeks. And these properties are taking 8 to 10% reductions from their original asking price. We're also seeing the flip side of it, that homes are still selling in the first weekend if they price very aggressively and they look great on the inside. But obviously, the longer that they stay on the market, the less they tend to get in the end. Homes that start with the wrong pricing can sit on the MLS for 150 to 300 days, and that is not uncommon right now. Areas competing with new construction are Aurora, Parker, and Castle Rock are feeling the squeeze because they're fighting against builders offering permanent 4.5% interest rates. But price cuts are just the tip of the iceberg. Sellers are now offering things they haven't had to offer in years. So sellers are giving more concessions in real estate deals than they've given in a long time. And so what I mean by that is they're giving, buy down money to buyers so that they can buy their rate down, either temporarily or permanently. They're also giving just closing cost money for buyers to pay their closing costs. They're also making concessions in inspection, replacing decks, doing furnace and AC replacements on just older equipment, more so than I've seen in a long time. And so this is happening more and more. It's really to the advantage of buyers right now in this buyer's market that we're in. And so those are some really good reasons why I would be considering buying a home in today's market, because you are getting a lot of breaks, not just on the price, but along the way, making the deal much sweeter. I really do remember during the pandemic more than one occasion where a home had a dinged up roof that had plenty of hail damage, and sellers did not want to replace the roof, even though they knew it had hail damage or they knew the roof was just shot, it had gone through its life expectancy. And I remember in one case the seller had actually pocketed the claim money for themselves, didn't even replace the roof, and then refused to replace it after the inspection. And the buyer was given the choice, do you want to move forward or not on this home, right? And that was the market environment that we were in during the pandemic when we had 1,200 homes on the market. It was just crazy low. So buyers had to do things that were really, really uncomfortable back then. And they also had to pay all their own closing costs. They didn't get any breaks. Well, they didn't really need breaks on rates because rates were already really low back then. We didn't even know what a temporary rate buy down was 4 years ago, to be honest. So that's all come in these last, couple years as rates have gone up quite a bit. But in today's environment, that's unheard of. If a roof has hail damage, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be replaced, or a buyer's going to walk, and terminate the contract because they have other options to choose from. So it's just a completely different environment surrounding inspection items right now than what we've had in previous years. So sellers are really coming through on inspection resolutions more than ever. So if you haven't bought a house before, this is how the process works. You typically hire an inspector who goes out to the property, inspects all the systems of the house. You may even do a radon test and a sewer scope to make sure that the sewer line's clean and that there's no radon, invisible gas coming from the subfloor, creating any toxins in the air. Also, after you get that report back a couple days later from your inspector, you sit down with your agent and you come up with a list of inspection objection items, right? You submit those items off to the seller, and nowadays we're seeing longer lists, we're seeing higher dollar cost items on those lists. The seller then goes and gets bids on those items typically, or they come back with some type of a credit. And say, hey, we really don't want to do work, but we'll just give you money for these items instead, right? You come to terms, that's called an inspection resolution. Once you're resolved on the items, and you move forward with the transaction. If you don't, if there's a standstill during the inspection, then the contract automatically terminates on the night of the inspection resolution deadline, and the buyer walks away with his earnest money back. And so that's how that works. So sellers are very motivated to keep that deal together. They don't want to go back on the market, and they don't want to face the music of, hey, we're back on the market because of this, right? Buyer backed out because of inspection, and here's why. Because now they have to disclose to everybody else any material defect that they have knowledge of per law. So it's important for them to get past that inspection. And as a buyer, it's important to know, that you've got some leverage there as far as your ability to negotiate a little bit and ask for certain things to be done. I never recommend that my buyers create a laundry list of little things. That's not really what inspection's for, but you want to focus on the things that are going to set you back. The things that could be costly down the road or are currently costly on a home to repair or replace, so that you don't have to do those things when you move in, but you can focus on doing those fun countertops, nice new carpet, whatever you want to do that's fun, that you can actually enjoy. As a listing agent, I hate to get a laundry list of items that's like 28 minor items. It'll drive anyone crazy and drive a seller crazy, right? And you lose trust with the seller, and oftentimes you don't come to terms after that because there's this trust bridge that's been broken. And so the best thing you can do is keep your list concise, but keep it on the items that you really want them to focus on. And most of the time, that's when you'll have the most success getting those items done. But sellers right now are really coming through on some of those higher dollar cost items. We're seeing sellers give $15,000 on concessions in some case, or more. In some cases, they're maybe giving $5,000 up front for closing costs, and then later, once they see there's a deck replacement or there's HVAC to be replaced, you get another $8,500 for HVAC, another $12,000 for a deck, and plus. It just depends on the condition of the home. Sometimes homes are in great condition. There's nothing to ask for, especially on a newly built home. Most of the time, inspectors are going to find something that you can go for, and sellers will have to make that choice if they want to keep the deal together and cooperate to get those inspection items resolved. And these levels of concessions that I'm seeing this year, they wouldn't have even happened last year in 2024, you guys. And we tilted into a buyer's market last year, but I wasn't seeing the same types of deals as I am this year. It's definitely a much more seller motivated market and buyer advantageous market that we're in right now in 2025. So the combination of initial offer negotiations, closing costs, and inspection items creates this a pretty ideal time to negotiate if you're a buyer. Sellers are making concessions I haven't seen in years. Just last week, I had a buyer get $15,000 off the asking price. Plus, the seller paid $5,000 in closing costs, replaced the $12,000 deck, and gave $8,500 in HVAC credits for an older furnace and older AC unit. That's over $40,000 in total concessions on one deal. None of this would have happened even last year. Sellers are so afraid of their home going back on the market that they're saying yes to inspection requests that they would have laughed at in 2022. The fear of starting over is driving sellers to agree to almost anything just to keep the deal together, because they see how painful it is to be on the market and the pain of the patience of waiting for that right buyer right now, since things are taking almost twice as long as they have in the past. This desperation makes sense when you see how long homes are actually sitting on the market now. So homes are sitting longer than anyone expected. And going into late summer, this is the summer lull, you guys. This is when we see market time really take an uptick. And last year, we got up to about 48 days on market for condos and about 43 days on market for single family homes. And that shot up, from a much lower number than earlier on in the year. And we're expecting the same thing to happen most likely this year, because that's just the seasonality of our market that we go through. And so, the difference between single family homes and condos is we've got even more saturation of condos and townhomes in our market compared to the single family homes that are available. And so that's why they're lasting a little longer. And also, condo buyers and townhome buyers are usually those first-time home buyers that are trying to get into their first place, and that market has shrunk tremendously. It's been cut in half because of affordability. That's who's been hit the hardest, is those entry-level buyers in this market. And so keep in mind, 70% of buyers that don't already own a home can't afford the payment that's the average payment of today. And so with that said, that market's struggling the most, and that's why those options are sitting the longest. And so if you're a homeowner or a seller that's trying to sell their condo or townhome, you got to be aggressive on price and start from the beginning. Otherwise, you're just going to be signing up for a very painful process of catching up to the market and, diving down to get to where market equilibrium takes place, and they see that value that you offer, and then you end up losing out on a lot more money than just starting at a price that's lower than what your expectations were. Days on market tell the whole story. Single family homes are taking 20% longer to sell than last year, but condos and townhomes, they're taking 72% longer. That's nearly double the time. We're talking 55 days on average for condos and townhomes versus 33 days for single family homes. The reason is stark. First-time home buyers have practically disappeared in our market. They used to make up 36% of the entire market. Now they only make up 18% of the entire market. So many sellers still think it's 2022. And I think it's common because Colorado pricing does not drop. And historically, it has not dropped very often. You know, you're looking at the Great Depression and the Great Recession. And from a overall year standpoint, from January to December, you won't find many years where Colorado home values go down. And so with that said, it's easy for sellers to have that mindset of, you know, my value hasn't gone down since 2022. And in some cases, in some areas, it hasn't, but in others it has. And sellers still don't understand that that's happened. So what's causing sellers to be in that pandemic boom mindset still? Really, I think it's simple. You know, values don't go down very often in Colorado. And we were in that low inventory market, you guys, from 2012 all the way up to 2022. And so you got a 10 to 11 year span there where we had very low inventory, sellers had their way, and a lot of people have more of a fixed mindset and they don't understand that markets change and they shift, you know, even month to month or week to week sometimes. And so it's easy to get stuck in that mindset if you're a homeowner. You got to understand that supply and demand dictate most of what happens in our market. And when now we have a tilted supply where we have more homes available than we have buyers that want to buy them, that's what's really caused this shift to happen. And we need sellers to adjust to that, to understand psychologically that 10-year run is over, right? And that we need to be aggressive on pricing to be able to find buyers in today's market. And so this is really affecting pricing strategies. You know, for me, I just look at, okay, here's where it looks like we are as far as the comps go, but I probably want to price 3% lower than that just so that we can get the demand and the excitement around that home that we need to have. And so I'm thinking about that constantly right now, especially during the summer lull timeframe. If you're trying to sell a home in August, when you've got back to school, you've got people enjoying the nice Colorado weather that we don't have all year round, and then you got people that are out of town traveling, you know, getting their last vacations in. It's a time of distraction. And so homeowners, if you're looking to sell your place, you've got to understand that your buying pool is shrinking during this time of year. And until we get past Labor Day a couple weeks, it's tough to find buyers in today's market. And so you have to be very calculated with what you're doing if you're trying to sell a home this time of year. Here's the psychology problem. Sellers lived through 10 years of a low inventory crisis where multiple offers and bidding wars were the norm. Even though they intellectually understand that the market has changed, subconsciously, they're still pricing like it's 2022. And they heard about or expected multiple offers for so long that it's embedded in their thinking. While single-family homes are down less than 1% year over year, with an average price of around $782,000, condos have dropped 7% almost. But sellers across the board are still setting prices based on that old reality where values only went up, never down. The market has definitely shifted. The numbers don't lie. We're officially in a buyer's market. We're sitting at 13,400 homes in total inventory. And economists say 12,000 homes is that magic line where the market shifts from being a seller's market to a buyer's market. We've been climbing steadily since March, adding 300 to 500 homes every single week. Here's what's really telling. In just the last 7 days, we've had 333 listings expire after their 6-month term ended in most cases, and 220 homes come back on the market after deals fell through. That's more homes coming back than we have listed as coming soon, only 136. We're seeing a 20% fallout rate, which means 1 in every 5 deals is collapsing or terminating before it gets to the closing table. With all of this chaos, smart sellers need to know how to avoid becoming just another stale listing. Okay, so how do we avoid that? How do we avoid becoming a stale listing on the market if you're thinking about listing nowadays? My advice is make sure that you are giving valid consideration to your cosmetic condition of your home. You know, most of the time when sellers are off, it's because their home is actually pretty dated. They've been there for maybe 20, 30 years. And to them, it's still updated, right? But styles have changed 4 times since you bought your home. And the challenge is most people in today's market, they want a more modern look and feel. And so if your home doesn't have that, then you really need to lean towards the homes and the comps in the neighborhood that don't have that have sold, right? And possibly even take a little bit of money off of that since the market has adjusted downward slightly. Whenever I see a listing that says original owner, that typically means very dated home. So be aware of that. If you've been in your home for a long time, you are way more prone and apt to overpricing your home because of all the emotional value that you have, but that nobody else really understands. And you also have a challenge of, not updating, because most of the time, a lot of updates happen when homes change hands, right? A seller prepares the home, gets the home ready, does some nice updates, and then turns it over to the next owner. And when that happens every every 7 to 9 years, homes generally stay pretty updated. But it's the ones that, stay in the same person's hands for 20 to 30 years. On average, I see those are the most dated homes and the toughest to sell sometimes. They're always in great shape, always very clean for the most part and taken care of. But keep in mind that buyers truly care about cosmetics and that this is an emotional process for most buyers. Buyers still buy on emotion and then justify later logically. So it's so crucial to make sure that we're winning the beauty contest cosmetically and not just fixing the furnace or fixing the roof, because buyers expect that nowadays, but they really want to come into something that is more modern. Also, it's so important to adjust for the seasonal timing of the year. That is crucial. So you have to understand the difference between selling in February, March, and April, which is the prime time to be on the market, and selling in July, August, or November, December, right? Those are the worst times to be on the market generally. But some of the best times to buy, by the way. Last year, the average price actually peaked in May. It was $40,000 above the low point that we had in September of 2024. So if we're talking about the best improvements that provide the best return on investment, back to the basics. Okay, we're looking at carpet, the right styles of carpet, paint, the right colors of paint, right? Keeping things light and bright, and also countertops and appliances. Those are big. The other things, lighting, door hardware. Those are other things that really sell and do well, to update your home so that you can make the most money out of it. There are other things that you can do, like moving tubs around, installing a new big shower, doing a deck, doing new HVAC equipment that will just not give you even a dollar for dollar return in today's market. So those are some of the things that I would be more reactive to, but I would be very proactive on the things that are going to make you 200 to 300% on your home. That's the difference that I'm talking about between mechanical upgrades like furnace, windows, plumbing fixtures, electric issues to the home, compared to emotional appeal upgrades, right? Like those countertops, quartz counters, backsplash that a lot of people are loving nowadays. Different types of fun that you can have with tile, right? On backsplashes. We're talking about stainless steel appliances, cabinets, right? The white cabinets or light gray cabinets, light cream colored cabinets, even some color nowadays is pretty in. So there's a lot of those emotional appeal upgrades that buyers are seeing on homes as they're looking through, whether it's Zillow, Homes.com, or the MLS, and they're getting excited about. And so they want to see that as they walk through. And a lot of those homes are robbing all the showings because it all starts with photos. So if people are seeing photos that they like, that are exciting to them, they're drawn to those homes, and that's where they're going to see them. And a lot of homeowners are out there going, why are people not coming to show my house, right? And it may be because, one, you may have taken your pictures with your iPhone and your pictures suck and they don't look good, right? Or two, we may not be using HDR photography and they're kind of blurry. Or three, your home isn't very updated, right? And so we have to really look at the cold hard truth here of how emotionally appealing is my home and how much attraction am I giving for buyers to come and see it. If you want to avoid becoming one of those 300-day listings, you need to price aggressively from day one. For condos and townhomes, I'm starting 4% below recent comps because I know that the 6-month-old sales don't reflect today's reality. Timing matters too. If you're listing in July or August during our summer lull, you better nail that pricing, because there's just less buyer activity during this time of year and more distractions for buyers. But here's the secret. Emotional appeal sells homes. Focus on flooring, paint, updated appliances, counters, lighting, and even door hardware. These cosmetic touches can give you a 200 to 300% return on investment. It's money well spent because buyers buy on emotion. Don't waste money on mechanical stuff like windows and furnaces before listing. You'll only get a 15% return. So on those types of items, I would be reactive. When buyers ask for stuff on inspection, you may have to deal with it at that point, but I wouldn't do it proactively. I would do it if you have to get done with the sale. Save those negotiations for inspection time. Whether you're a seller trying to avoid these pitfalls or a buyer looking to take advantage of this shifting market, having the right strategy is crucial. I help people navigate exactly these situations every day. So reach out using the contact information below, and let's discuss how to position you for success in today's Denver market. There's something happening in Denver right now that every home seller needs to know about, and it's catching a lot of people off guard. In my next video, I break down exactly what's going on and how to protect yourself if you're thinking about selling. Click right here to watch Denver home sellers blindsided by something terrible happening. You do not want to miss this.